I'm being arrested by fake cops right now. My neighbor is behind the whole thing, and she's recording every second like it's her big victory speech. Cold steel is on my wrists, the whole neighborhood is watching, and she's convinced she's finally caught the monster who ruined her life. But what she doesn't know is that in less than 30 seconds, her entire world is about to collapse. The secret I've been hiding from everyone, yeah. It changes everything. Stick around, because you won't believe what happens next. Let me rewind to where this nightmare began. I had just moved into Oakwood Estates, one of those picture-perfect suburban neighborhoods with manicured lawns, tall oak trees, and people who waved every time you drove by. After 25 years in law enforcement, I thought I'd finally earned some peace. I had retired from my post as police chief in Riverside County, about 60 miles away. But here's the thing I never told a soul. When neighbors asked what I did, I shrugged it off with, just a county clerk. Paperwork all day. The disguise worked: boring car, cheap polos, old Civic, nobody questioned it, or so I thought. The first close call came when the UPS guy dropped off a box addressed to Chief Ortiz. My heart froze as Emily, my tech-savvy neighbor, watered her flowers just a few feet away. She tilted her head, reading the label before I snatched it up with a laugh. Mix-up. Pretty common name. She smiled, but the suspicion lingered in her eyes. That was warning number one. Meanwhile, across the street, Audrey Brooks was busy unraveling. She had transformed her tiny apartment into a stalker's dream board: photos of me, copies of my schedule, even my license plate scrawled in red marker. She was obsessed. To her, I wasn't just some retiree, I was the man who destroyed her family. Why? A botched police database leak. One quick Google search, and she thought she'd struck gold. Seth Ortiz, age 45, arrested for manslaughter. Victim: Louise Harrove. Same age, same name, same region. She didn't bother with the details. Different case numbers, different cities, different stories. But grief doesn't care about details. She needed a villain. And I was it. The first direct confrontation came on a cool morning. I was sipping coffee on my porch when Audrey stormed up like a parade marshal, clipboard clutched like a badge of honor. And speaking of badges, she had one pinned to her chest, cheap, shiny, and fake. "Mr. Ortiz," she barked, trying to sound official. "You are in violation of community standards." I almost spit out my coffee. "Ma'am, there's no HOA here," I said, calmly sliding out my property deed and county registration papers across the railing. "These are official records. Oakwood Estates doesn't have a homeowners association." Any normal person would have walked away. Audrey doubled down. Her voice cracked as she shouted, "Killers don't deserve peaceful retirement." The words echoed, and I saw Emily's curtains shift. She was watching, wide-eyed, while Audrey stepped over my property line. My hands went up, palms open, but my stance blocked her from crossing further. For a tense 3 seconds, we just stared. Her clipboard shook. Her pupils burned with obsession. Every instinct in me screamed danger. And then I noticed something. In her wallet flashed just enough as she gripped that clipboard. I caught a photo labeled Louise Recovery 2024. It showed a smiling man taking a selfie. Not exactly what you'd expect for someone Audrey swore had been dead for years. I didn't press it. Not yet. I filed it away. From there, things spiraled into psychological warfare. Emily started noticing the cracks too, how Audrey checked her mailbox like it held state secrets, how she made cryptic phone calls at exactly 3 o'clock every Tuesday, and how she muttered while staring across the street at my house. One afternoon, Emily overheard her through the thin walls of the duplex. Audrey's voice trembled as she whispered, "Louise, honey, the bills are piling up. But don't worry, I'm going to get justice for both of us." The gossip spread like wildfire. Who was Louise? Why was Audrey paying medical bills for someone she swore was gone? And if her brother was alive, what had really happened? Neighbors whispered. Curious but hesitant. Nobody wanted to be the one to knock on the door of the woman with the clipboard and the crack in her voice. Meanwhile, I was doing the only logical thing, turning myself into a human evidence vault. Every bogus violation slip, every time she slinked onto my property, every veiled threat she hissed at the neighbors, It was all logged. I had screenshots, camera footage, corroborating statements. Piece by piece, I was putting together a harassment case that could survive in any courtroom. To everyone else, I looked like some obsessive county records clerk with way too much free time. The irony wasn't lost on me. She was hunting a killer, not realizing the guy across the street was a cop quietly running an airtight investigation. Sometimes life has a wicked sense of humor. One late night, I was cross-referencing files when the truth finally hit me like a bat to the chest. The real Seth Ortiz, the fugitive Audrey thought she'd unmasked, wasn't even in this state. Different crimes, different timeline. Nothing remotely connected. That meant months of her planning, scheming, obsessing, had all been aimed at the wrong man. And the real question that kept me awake until dawn was, if she's built this elaborate vendetta on a mistake, how far is she willing to go now? The answer came with the sunrise. At 6 a.m., Audrey was already blanketing the neighborhood with what looked like a one-woman FBI manhunt. She scurried around with a roll of tape, hands trembling, slapping wanted flyers to mailboxes and lampposts. My photo ripped straight from property records. That dead-eyed DMV mugshot that makes anyone look like a creep was plastered under giant red letters branding me a dangerous fugitive. And she didn't stop there. By mid-morning, she'd strolled into a copy shop to print fake FBI business cards, the kind you'd see in a crime drama prop box. Later, she was handing them out to neighbors, introducing herself as Agent Brooks, Fugitive Recovery Division, voice pitched with the kind of fake authority that almost sounded real. I'll give her this much: if Hollywood had called, she'd have nailed the audition. But the real showpiece was the binder, a forged police file, perfectly weathered with coffee stains, overstuffed with sticky notes and obsessive highlights. When she handed it to Jack, the poor guy froze. His lips parted. "Jesus," he whispered. "He really killed someone?" Audrey had nailed her target. Jack had lost his brother in a wreck not long ago, and the idea that I was some unpunished killer hit him where it hurt. He wasn't thinking about payouts or attention. He thought he was fighting for justice, which only made what followed even darker. Jack started gearing up like some DIY vigilante. He walked into a costume shop and walked out with a knockoff police uniform. I can only imagine the clerk's confusion, play cop or arrest the neighbor cop. Hidden among the cheesy props, though, was the detail that chilled me. Real industrial zip ties, not theater props, not toys. That's when the gravity of it hit me. This wasn't harassment anymore. This was the prelude to something physical, something violent. So I doubled down. My house became a command post. Ring cameras set at strategic angles, redundant backups, carefully logged timestamps. Everything filed like evidence in a trial because, well, that's exactly what it was. Neighbors figured I was just paranoid about porch pirates. Seth's a little intense about package theft. They'd chuckle, not realizing the clerk next door was building a felony-level case. The closest call came in the garage one afternoon when Jack swung by. My police radio crackled with live chatter from dispatch. His eyes snapped to it instantly. For a frozen heartbeat, I thought the cover was blown. I faked a cough and said, "Old radios pick up everything, fire, cops, even airport towers." He squinted but let it go. Disaster narrowly avoided. Meanwhile, the street fractured like a reality TV feud. On one side was Team Audrey, the believers who whispered behind hedges, yanked their kids indoors when I passed, and treated me like a threat. On the other was Team Seth, with Emily at the helm, the neighbors who laughed off Audrey's paranoia and kept inviting me over for cookouts like nothing was wrong. Then there was the silent middle, the people who kept blinds shut, refused eye contact, and tried to pretend none of this insanity was happening. And then came the phone calls. That was the detail nobody could quite figure out. Every day, Audrey's phone would light up with Louise's medical team. She'd duck into corners, drop her voice to a conspiratorial whisper, pacing like she was guarding state secrets. But in suburbs, walls are thin, voices carry. More than one person heard the pattern. Emily finally said what we were all thinking. Didn't Louise die 2 years ago? So why is she still getting calls from his doctors? Even Jack noticed the cracks. "Funny," he muttered one afternoon. "Your brother needs a lot of medical care for someone who's supposed to be dead." Audrey snapped back at him, her mask slipping. The timing was too clean to ignore. Every medical call, lined up with her monthly bank runs, always withdrawing the same $800 in cash. And at night, when the lights in her apartment dimmed, the cracks widened. I'd catch glimpses through her window, her perched in front of a photo frame, whispering to her dead brother's picture like he was alive. "I'll get justice for you, baby brother. That monster won't get away." It was equal parts pathetic and terrifying. She wasn't just lying to the neighbors, she'd managed to convince herself. In her world, every coincidence was damning proof. Every doubt was enemy propaganda. And I was the villain who had to be destroyed. By now, my work phone was buzzing nonstop. My boss wanted to know why I was burning through vacation days like confetti. But walking away wasn't an option. Every instinct I had told me Audrey was winding up for something explosive. And those shady calls about Louise's medical bills, they reeked of a scam. 25 years of chasing fraud meant I could smell a con from a mile away. But even I didn't realize how deep this hole went. That night, Jack brought out the uniform. To call it cheap would insult Halloween stores everywhere. But the thing that froze my blood wasn't the fabric, it was the way Audrey looked at it. Her eyes lit up like she'd been handed Excalibur. Jack rehearsed his little arrest speech in the mirror, until he suddenly stopped and asked the one question that made my stomach flip. "After we arrest him, then what?" Silence. Audrey blinked like he'd just asked her to explain rocket science. That silence was worse than any plan. Because people without plans, they'll do anything. No rules, no limits, just raw obsession. I barely slept, running through crisis management tactics in my head. The bitter irony wasn't lost on me. I was preparing to stop a fake arrest by running a real one. Sometimes reality outpaces Netflix. Morning came with an eerie calm. Audrey had been up all night too, practicing lines like she was auditioning for a courtroom drama. "The community will witness justice," she whispered at her mirror, clutching her phone like a holy relic. Jack, meanwhile, was sweating bullets in his car, the costume folded beside him. Every few seconds, he picked up the badge, set it down, picked it up again, as if trying to hypnotize himself into believing it was real. The poor guy was trapped between loyalty and common sense, and both were tearing him apart. Me? I prepped like it was game day, checked the hidden cameras, disguised as a doorbell tune-up, made a few quiet calls for backup in case things turned ugly. My gut told me Audrey had sprinted way past reason, and if this blew up, someone could actually get hurt. Out on the street, neighbors gathered like it was tailgate Sunday, coffee cups in hand, whispering about finally seeing justice. Emily had her window open, live stream rolling, her viewer count ticking up like a slot machine. And then came the call. Audrey's phone lit up with that all-too-familiar ringtone. "Luis," she gasped, her whole demeanor flipping from iron-fisted avenger to desperate sister. "Emergency surgery, $1,200? His voice drifted through the speaker, calm and casual, not a hint of pain. The contrast made my stomach churn. Then Audrey did something that made me physically ill. She borrowed $1,200 from sweet old Mrs. Patterson, who thought she was funding a life-saving procedure. Watching it unfold, I realized Audrey wasn't just misguided, she was being played. Back inside, Jack tried to nail down their procedure one last time. In costume, with Audrey directing, he rattled off a shaky version of Miranda rights. Then he froze mid-sentence. "Okay, I cuff him. I walk him to the car. Then what?" The silence was deafening. Audrey had never thought past the arrest itself. No plan for where to take me. No plan for police response. Just blind faith in her own delusion. You could see the cracks forming in her expression as panic bled through. 9 a.m. sharp. Jack finally mustered the courage to step out of his car. His hands trembled so badly it took 3 tries to open the door. From my window, I watched him breathe like a man about to jump off a cliff. The costume badge caught the sun at the wrong angle, practically screaming, "Plastic." I grabbed my coffee and waited by the door, half amused, half terrified. The bell rang. I opened the door mid-sip to find Jack standing there like a nervous mall cop, stammering out a rehearsed speech. His paperwork looked like it had been printed in Comic Sans, but hanging from his belt were real zip ties, and that combination, the fake trappings mixed with dangerous conviction, was what made this whole circus deadly serious. so I played it cool. "Officer," I said softly, setting my mug aside and raising my hands. "There must be some mistake. I'm just a county clerk." Relief flashed across Jack's face. He thought he had me. He fumbled with the toy cuffs, which barely clicked closed. Across the street, Audrey bounced like a director watching her star nail a scene. Phones were recording. The crowd leaned in, but what none of them knew was that the show they'd been waiting for was about to flip on its head. I play along, curious to see just how far this circus act can go. We head toward Jack's dented old sedan, which he's laughably trying to pass off as an unmarked cruiser, while Audrey records every step like she's directing an Oscar contender. I take note of my witnesses, Emily pressed to her window. Mrs. Patterson frozen with her morning paper, the Johnsons peeking from their porch, Fred pretending to rake leaves while hanging on every word. Perfect. The bigger the audience, the stronger my case. That's when I decide it's showtime. Halfway to Jack's car, I stop and turn with a steady smile. "Jack," I say evenly, watching his pupils dilate as the realization hits. "I'm going to stop you right there." He blinks, confused, just long enough for me to slowly reach into my back pocket. No sudden moves, can't risk him panicking. Then the real deal flashes in the sun. Genuine badge, solid metal. Police Chief Seth Ortiz, Riverside County. I raise my voice so the entire block hears me. "Jack Morgan, you're under arrest. Impersonating a police officer. Conspiracy. Attempted kidnapping. The transformation is immediate." Jack's skin drains of color until he looks like he's about to keel over right on my driveway. His mouth opens and closes soundlessly, like a fish gasping on a dock. Across the street, there's a sharp crack. Audrey's phone slips from her limp hands. "No!" she shrieks, voice breaking. "You're lying! I have proof!" She fumbles with her printouts, pointing a trembling finger at me. "Same name, same age, it's you." Her desperation is almost painful, but Jack's breaking too, darting frantic looks between us like a man whose world is crumbling in real time. "Ma'am," I say evenly, slipping my phone from my pocket. "You've got the wrong Seth Ortiz. Look, different case, different state, entirely different man." I pull up the official database and scroll to the highlighted lines. That case was in Arizona, March 2022. I was in California, running Riverside PD, with hundreds of witnesses. Jack finally croaks out a sound. Pure panic. "Oh my God. I just tried to fake arrest a real police chief." He stumbles back, tripping over Emily's garden border. Plastic handcuffs and knockoff badges scatter into the grass as his flimsy uniform snags and tears on the rose bushes, exposing his street clothes underneath. In seconds, their sinister operation is revealed for what it truly is: cheap costumes, bad planning, and a whole lot of delusion. Half the neighbors burst into laughter. The other half stand frozen in shock. Everyone has their phones out, filming every second. That's when a sound slices through the chaos like a blade. Audrey's ringtone. The screen lights up in the dirt. "Louise, medical team." The crowd falls silent. Dead silent. All eyes fix on that glowing phone. A supposed call from a man who's been dead for 2 years. Audrey's face turns ghostly white as I lock eyes with her. "Ma'am," I say slowly, "if your brother's calling, who have you been sending $800 a month to for the past 2 years? Her finger hovers over the green button, shaking. The entire neighborhood holds its breath. Emily's live stream ticks past 1,000 viewers, comments exploding, but nobody's watching their phones anymore. All attention is on Audrey, standing center stage in a nightmare of her own making. Finally, her trembling thumb presses accept. "Louise," she cries, voice shattering. "How are you calling me? You're dead." And then his voice, crystal clear through the speaker, casual, annoyed. "Calling you? Audrey, what are you talking about? I call every month. And the banking app says you missed this month's payment. I've got bills to pay." The silence that follows is absolute. A so-called corpse, casually nagging his sister about money. Audrey's eyes dart between me, the crowd, and the phone like she's begging for someone to rewrite reality. "You're supposed to be dead," she whispers, trembling. But denial won't save her. Luis barrels right on. "Dead? The surgery was fine. I just needed cash for recovery and legal stuff. You've been sending it, remember? Like we agreed. That's when comprehension slams into her like a freight train. She gasps, clutching her throat. I've been planning revenge for your murder. I've been targeting innocent people because I thought you were dead. And Luis? No remorse? No shame. Just irritation. Hey, I needed the money. Easier to keep you paying when you thought I was gone. Besides, you found some random guy to blame. Worked out fine for me. The neighborhood reaction is explosive. Emily's stream is going viral in real time. Mrs. Patterson looks ready to faint, probably recalling the $1,200 she loaned Audrey for hospital fees. Phones are everywhere. Neighbors whispering in disbelief. Jack is backing away, desperate to escape the fallout. And Audrey? She's unraveling completely. Her grief, rage, and humiliation tearing her apart in front of the entire community. But Luis isn't done. Through the speaker, he brags about his girlfriend, his new car, even vacation plans, while the sister who bled herself dry for him crumbles in the middle of the street. Look, Audrey, he says with the kind of smugness that only comes from a man who's never once paid for his lies. I've got it made. Decent apartment, steady income off your pity, no messy family drama. Why would I ruin that by telling you the truth? The cold precision in his tone makes my stomach turn. This isn't just fraud, it's weaponized cruelty disguised as brotherly concern. Jack finally blurts out what everyone's thinking, voice cracking with disbelief. So we went after an innocent man. Because your living brother was bleeding you dry? He turns to me, eyes begging me to explain this circus. But after 25 years wearing the badge, even I had to admit I'd never seen family dysfunction weaponized like this. Jack, I told him, keeping my tone measured while Audrey unraveled on the asphalt. You were tricked by someone who was already a victim. A scam on top of a scam. You just ended up holding the bag. Meanwhile, Audrey is on her knees in the street, clutching her phone like it's a lifeline, sobbing while Luis drones on about expenses and treatments she'll need to pay for. The sound is unbearable, grief, rage, betrayal, all boiling over in public. 2 years, she wails. I buried you for 2 years. I plotted revenge for 2 years. I've been living in hell while you've been living it up. It's the sound of a woman realizing the person she loved most never even existed in the way she believed. That's when instinct took over. This wasn't just harassment anymore, we were staring down an interstate con. I leaned closer to her phone. Luis, this is Chief Seth Ortiz. Congratulations. You just admitted to felony fraud on a live police line while your sister incriminated herself based on your lies. I hope the steak dinners and silk sheets were worth it, because federal prison food won't be. The call cut immediately, but it was far too late. The confession was captured, dozens of witnesses heard it, and Emily's stream had already blasted it out to over 1,000 people. The fallout was like dominoes collapsing in slow motion. Audrey's hysterical sobs, Jack's shell-shocked surrender, Emily's viewer count doubling by the minute, and the neighborhood once so eager to brand me a murderer was now staring at Audrey like she was both victim and villain. Mrs. Patterson wept openly, realizing every loan she'd given for Louis' treatments had gone straight into his pocket. Even the die-hard Audrey loyalists were forced to admit they'd been manipulated from day one. But Luis wasn't done making himself look worse. Furious that his scam was imploding on camera, he barked through the phone. Audrey, hang up right now. Like she was the problem. Later, when agents finally stormed his penthouse, a bigger question haunted everyone. If Luis was living this lavishly on Audrey's cash, how many other grieving families had he conned? The next hours felt like a federal sting unfolding in real time. I was already briefing financial crimes investigators while Audrey screamed in the street. Within 2 hours, Detective Harris called me back, voice tight with fury. Chief Ortiz, we ran him. This isn't his first time. We've identified at least 3 other families across state lines who've been wiring him money for fake treatments. Meanwhile, Emily's live stream skyrocketed past 5,000 viewers as clips of Audrey's collapse and Luis's taped confession spread like wildfire. The comments were a flood of outrage, sympathy, and people sharing eerily similar stories about endless emergencies from their own relatives. But the question that kept surfacing was chilling. How does someone fake their own death so convincingly that even their family buys it for years? The answer, as we learned, was both simple and disturbing. Federal agents wasted no time. While we dealt with Jack's failed citizen's arrest, they were already tailing Luis's luxury complex where he wasn't even hiding under an alias. Why bother when your victims believe you're 6 feet under? The footage of his arrest went viral. Luis answered the door in silk pajamas and designer loafers, girlfriend in the background asking who it was. The second he saw the badges, his face drained pure panic. But the most chilling discovery was inside. Agents found meticulous notes about Audrey, her bank balances, work hours, mental state. He'd been cataloging his sister's grief like a science project, calculating exactly how much guilt he could squeeze out of her each month. The forged medical bills were disturbingly professional, complete with logos from real hospitals and names of doctors that didn't exist. He'd even built fake social media accounts for medical staff to make it believable. The effort he put into destroying his sister was almost more disturbing than the fraud itself. Back home, the neighborhood was reckoning. People who'd sided with Audrey were sickened by how easily they'd been duped into tormenting me. Mrs. Patterson realized the surgery money she'd handed over had paid for Luis's last resort trip. The Johnsons came over in person, ashamed. "We should have known better," Mr. Johnson admitted. "You're the quietest neighbor we've ever had. The idea you were a killer should have been laughable." Their guilt was sincere, but it also showed how quickly lies can poison a community. Jack, meanwhile, was unraveling. The man was broken. Believing he was helping a grieving sister, he'd instead become a pawn in her delusion and Luis's con. When officers arrived, he confessed to everything: the fake uniform, the zip ties, the planned arrest. "I thought I was doing the right thing," he kept saying through tears. His attorney later argued Jack was a victim too, and I had to agree. Luis and Audrey had hijacked his sense of justice and twisted it against me. 3 days later, the arraignment was standing room only. Emily streamed from the courthouse steps to nearly 8,000 viewers. Local reporters swarmed. It had all the makings of tabloid gold: betrayal, mistaken identity, vigilante justice, and the con of the century. When Audrey shuffled in wearing jail orange, the change was shocking. The fire was gone. She looked hollow. 10 years older in just days. Crushed by betrayal deeper than any legal sentence. Luis appeared by video from federal lockup, stripped of all swagger. The prosecutor rattled off charges: wire fraud, mail fraud, identity theft, conspiracy. He tried to argue it was a family misunderstanding. The judge cut him off cold. "Defrauding multiple families across state lines isn't a domestic squabble, Mr. Hargrove. It's federal crime." 6 weeks later, sentencing revealed the full scale. Luis had conned 7 families over 5 years, bleeding more than $80,000 from parents, siblings, and widows who thought they were helping a loved one survive. Some had gone broke funding his treatments. A court-ordered evaluation diagnosed him as a sociopath incapable of empathy. Audrey got 18 months in county plus probation and restitution. Jack was sentenced to house arrest and community service. But Luis? He got 4 years in federal prison and ordered to pay tens of thousands back to his victims. The judge's words were clear: "Preying on your own family will earn you no mercy here." And here's the kicker. As Emily's stream hit record numbers outside the courthouse, my phone buzzed. A text from Detective Harris. "Chief Ortiz, we need to talk." This wasn't the only neighborhood. My blood froze. Luis wasn't freelancing. He was part of a web, an organized ring of dead relatives scams operating in half a dozen states. Some victims had been sending cash for over a decade. Our little neighborhood circus had just pulled back the curtain on a nationwide con, and the rabbit hole went far deeper than any of us were ready for. The emotional wreckage was staggering, but the financial devastation hit even harder. Lifelong savings wiped out, retirement funds gutted, college accounts emptied. Families went into debt trying to rescue relatives who weren't sick or dying at all, but living comfortably off their sorrow. When the federal probe finally opened, it was like watching dominoes fall. One victim led to another. One forged document exposed a dozen more. Luis wasn't even the brains of the operation. He was a mid-level cog in a machine that had been running for over a decade, run by someone who collected identities the way others collect coins. Fake records, forged obituaries, fabricated medical files so well designed they slipped past grieving families who were in no shape to question them. It wasn't sloppy, it was systematic, a business built on grief. Meanwhile, back in suburbia, the neighborhood started stitching itself back together, though nobody looked at things quite the same anymore. People were more cautious, more aware of how easily fear and grief could be twisted. Ironically, property values rose once the truth came out. Having a former police chief on the street apparently counted as a security feature in real estate listings. Mrs. Patterson got every penny of her $1,200 back from the restitution pool, with a little interest. She promptly donated the extra to a nonprofit that helps fraud victims, because that's just who she is. Emily, on the other hand, took her viral infamy and spun it into a real job. What started as shaky iPhone live streams became serious coverage of community scandals and, eventually, investigative journalism. The trial itself drew nationwide attention, with Emily's reporting pulling thousands of viewers daily. The questions at its core fascinated people. How do you convince someone a loved one is dead? How do you sustain that fiction for years? What kind of person could turn family loyalty into a cash stream? Expert witnesses laid it bare these scammers didn't cast wide nets. They hunted vulnerable people. The grieving, the addicted, the unstable. Anyone too emotionally raw to see the scam clearly. Luis and his cohorts weren't just emptying wallets. They were tearing at people's ability to trust, even within their own families. The hardest part to watch was Audrey's testimony. She described 2 years of guilt, paranoia, and sleepless nights, convinced she'd failed her brother. She admitted she let rage consume her, reshaping her into someone unrecognizable. The tragic part? She had been a kindergarten teacher, the type of woman who once spent her days teaching kids to spell their names and read storybooks. To see that gentle person twisted into a vigilante wreck was unsettling, even for the courtroom veterans. Luis, by contrast, was unmoved. When asked to speak before sentencing, he whined about his business being interrupted, as though fraud was a legitimate trade. He even had the gall to suggest his victims should thank him for teaching them financial caution. The judge's response cut like a knife. You've turned love into a weapon. There's no fixing that. The only justice left is to keep you away from decent people. Luis walked away with 8 years in federal prison, 4 for fraud, 4 more for emotional manipulation. He owed over $300,000 in restitution, a debt he'd never shake. His partners were given similar terms. The ringleader, the architect of it all, was hit with 25 years and no chance of parole. The entire network collapsed, accounts frozen, aliases unmasked. Their empire of grief dismantled. For once, justice landed squarely. Jack, surprisingly, had the most hopeful arc. His punishment was community service with an organization that helped fraud victims. His lived experience of being manipulated gave him a rare insight, and he became skilled at spotting red flags. His testimony later helped prosecutors in other cases. In a strange way, he found purpose through failure, and it stuck. Audrey's journey took longer. Her 18 months in county gave her time to work with trauma counselors. She eventually went back to teaching in another district where nobody knew her story. More than that, she began helping kids from families torn apart by fraud. She taught them a lesson she learned painfully. Love is real, even if people you trust betray you. That kind of resilience deserves respect. 5 years later, the neighborhood had remade itself. We had block parties, clean sidewalks, and a sense of solidarity that never existed before. Emily was still reporting, though thankfully on potholes and zoning debates rather than fake funerals. Mrs. Patterson remained the local saint, though she now double-checks any request for emergency money. As for me, I actually retired properly this time. Departments still call me in for advice on fraud cases, since our suburban saga ended up in training manuals nationwide. The greatest lesson I carried from all of it? The razor-thin line between justice and revenge. Audrey thought she was chasing justice, but she was only being weaponized. Real justice takes evidence, process, patience. It's colder, but it sticks. Revenge feels satisfying in the moment, but it always leaves collateral damage. Sometimes the quiet neighbor with the Civic really is just a quiet guy. Sometimes he's also a cop with decades of experience who remembers details others forget. Either way, the truth has a way of clawing its way to the surface, especially when arrogance makes people careless. What started as a supposed murder case turned out to be one of the most complex fraud rings I'd ever seen. Luis and his crew built their empire on grief, banking on the generosity of families in pain. But in the end, they discovered what happens when they target the wrong community, one that fights back with evidence, unity, and law. And if you've stuck with me this far, you deserve another round of BD Stories madness. Because believe me, this wasn't even the wildest neighborhood disaster we've seen this year. Hit that like button, cue up the next episode, and let's keep unraveling the unbelievable truths hiding right next door.